Thank you. Moving on with the program, I'd like to introduce Tomas Mac Eoin, CEO of Hereworks. The session topic is, oh, there you are, Thomas. I'm looking over there where you were sitting. Okay. Real Insights, a day in the life of a smart building. His impressive background of 20 plus years in technology and real estate industries includes experience in AV, workspace fit out, IP networks, automation, and RF engineering. He's a current member of the Institute of Engineers in Ireland. As CEO of Hereworks, Tomas is passionate about delivering Master Systems Integration services to improve the human-building interaction and sustainability of smart buildings. This has led to the development of Hereworks Happy, a smart building system, which we're going to hear more about. Thank you, folks.
Cheers. No, absolutely terrified of this clicker, by the way. But anyway, thanks, Bob, for having me back again. Look, are we ready to go? Or just click. There we go. So as Bob said, I am Tomás. I am the CEO of Hereworks. We're a Master Systems Integrator, and despite what Claire said, it's a great it's a great position to be in a smart building project. But we also develop our own software as a service platform called Hereworks Happy. And what that tries to do is build on the data that the MSI puts in the data lake and actually try and improve the well-being of people in that building. And we have something called the Hereworks Happy score, which is basically a representation of how well the building is meeting the needs of its occupants. If you were lucky enough to be listen to me last year, you'll remember that I spoke about that. If we focus on the human in a smart building, we'll get everything else right. So obviously we'll get staff well-being and happiness right. As a result of that, we'll get increased and improved productivity because we're designing more appropriate spaces for the humans. We'll reduce our carbon emissions, and we'll also reduce waste. And the waste I'm talking about there is particularly the wasted maintenance, the waste around how we maintain buildings. We spoke about several times today that the real value in an organization has got to be centered around its people. And this is where the biggest impact can be made to any organization. And if you hang around with me for longer than about 5 minutes, you'll hear me talking about inspired employees. Now, inspired employees are those employees who feel no barrier to the workday. There's nothing really getting in their way, and they feel a good connection to the workplace. And according to Bain & Co., who did a bit of research, they said that an inspired employee can be up to 225% more productive than a merely satisfied employee. So 2.25 times more productive. And it's helping create those inspired employees that's always been the focus of our work at Hereworks. Now, Bob asked me here today to talk about insights and really draw on our experience in our work as to what we've seen in the kind of day of a life in a smart building. And the insights I'll present to you today are from 3 of our clients. 2 of them are in the financial sector, and 1 of them is in the construction sector. And it's both from the data that we got from their buildings, it's from one-to-one interviews we've had with the people who manage those buildings, and then we also survey the occupants of that building as well. And actually, one of the first things we do when we onboard Hereworks Happy Building is we conduct an onboarding survey. And we've actually developed that survey in conjunction with Dublin City University. They have a Centre for Workplace Psychology. And we developed that survey, and one of the questions we asked during that is for users of the building to rank in order what's important to them in their day in the life of the building. And I'm just going to share with you some of the results. So no matter really what company we go to, the top 3 is pretty much identical. Internal environment is always on top. So that's obviously your air quality, your heat, the noise levels in the building as well. Followed by IT systems, so that would include obviously your IT systems, but the AV systems in your boardrooms, and are they available, do they work, and their ease of use. And then finally, cleanliness of the buildings and the facilities. Those 2 swap a little bit depending on the building. But who has the biggest impact on, what job performer in a building has the biggest impact on those three things? Well, it's the building managers, the facility managers. So we use the jobs to be done framework to do all our product research for Hereworks Happy. And we focused our research on those job performers, so the facility managers. So again, what we found is, well, look, we know that a smart building has a job to do, and that's actually to look after its occupants. And when we spoke to facility managers, we got this common set of themes coming back. And again, I'll share with you some of those results. So the facility managers do see themselves as responsible for well-being. Now, that's when they get over the fact that you're not talking about mindfulness and maybe giving them a massage at the desk, but they do see themselves actually responsible for well-being. The other common theme was that they have a big uncertainty about what the day will bring. So when they get up in the morning, they don't know what they're going to be doing that day. And as a result, that can be stressful for them. And it brings, a lot of tension. And as a result, they go in before everybody else is in. Any facility manager, they're in early, and they're on their feet a lot. They either don't have the systems, or they don't trust the systems, or they can't see the wood for the trees in the systems that they do have. But the overarching thing we found was that reporting and managing building issues is challenging. We found the facility managers don't hear about half the problems that occur in the building. And if they do hear about them, it's maybe a tap on the shoulder when someone passed them and says, there's a leak, or there's a messy bathroom down there. Or actually this photo, which is a real photo I took during a walk around with a client. We recreated it in our own office just to make it not so obvious who the client was. But someone went to a desk, cable was missing, and the only way they could report the problem was stick a note on the screen. But the reality of it is that most of the time, people don't report it at all. They have a bitch and moan to their colleague, and they move on to the next desk. So people don't go back, they don't log on to a CAF FM system and fill out a whole load of forms, find the asset. So the problems that have the most impact and rank highest on our staff's well-being and happiness go unreported. And even when companies do prioritize those things, they tend to be incredibly wasteful. So they'll re-lamp 20% of the lighting each year, they'll hoover in the morning and in the evening, or they'll empty the bins once a day, whether it's required or not. So it's incredibly wasteful. And so we looked to solve this. And actually, immediately we turned to our own Hereworks Happy app, which is an occupant app. It's where people go and book desks, and they can see the happy score and all that. And this is where I'm going to be a little bit controversial, so apologies. But I don't like occupant apps. Now, don't get me wrong. We make one, and I'll sell you one. But and when I started this journey, I thought, this is what smart buildings is all about. It's all about this app that the user of a building will use, and they can access all its services. But this single pane of glass idea for the user, yeah, look, I get it. But I particularly wince when I see, these tenant apps on tender documents from landlords. So these are landlords that have big buildings. They're going to have maybe one or two anchor tenants, maybe a couple of smaller tenants, and they're trying to develop this panacea for their users. Look, I get it. You want to make those things really easy to access for your tenants, but the reality of it is, every tenant is different. The bigger ones probably have their own apps. The apps are out of date as soon as you publish them. Yeah, okay, we can have a team of people keeping them up to date, but we're never really going to be as efficient as Google Maps at getting you to work. We're never going to be as efficient at Outlook at managing your calendar and events, or at the hot desk. The reality of it is, people who make these systems, smart lockers, parking, hot desk booking, they do a pretty good job. Enable single sign-on. We're used to using different apps in our lives. It's also very hard to get people to actually install apps, particularly with bring your own device. And what we found is forcing people to install an app so they can access parts of the building. I don't like it. And I'm the worst in the world. When you sit down at the airport and you have to download an app to order a meal. It's just, it can be quite annoying. So we need to do better. And the reality of it is that an occupant's interaction with a building should be seamless. It should be light touch, and it should be almost invisible. Because after all, it's the building that has the job, it's the building that has a job to do to look after its occupants, and not the other way around. So getting back to the problem at hand, how do we hear about these problems that have these big impact on people's day-to-day? Well, in keeping with our theory of appless design, we developed something called Hereworks Solve, which is all about fast, smart, and location-aware reporting of big building problems. I'll not go into the big sales pitch. You can find me after. But what it's all about is if you see something wrong in a building, you can report it as a guest or a user. There's no app. We can also, even without your email address, there's no need to log in. We don't need to know who you are. We can give you feedback as well on the problem, so you feel like you've contributed to a better workplace. But it's simple. You just tap, 2 clicks, and report the problem. But this brings to attention, I suppose, a lot of building issues that wouldn't have been brought before. So we no longer have to be wasteful in our maintenance activities. And because it's location aware, we can heat map these problems as well, and we can start to predict. We were talking about machine learning earlier on. We can start to predict and correlate these problems. So just to remind you, what was the 3 most important things? The internal environment, the IT system, and the cleanliness. Now, I'm going to talk about some of the insights here now that we've seen to date, where we've installed this. And I'll start, actually, this was a client, you can see here, it was back in a week in July. It was shortly after Solve went live in the building. And what interestingly found that 55% of all the problems reported within the first or second week was about toilet roll in the bathrooms. Now, you think that's fairly mundane, but in reality, it was a real niggly problem. It was about there wasn't enough toilet roll in a lot of the bathrooms. Very easy fixed, but yet it's a thing that people really didn't want to verbalize for whatever reason. The next thing was about the coffee machine. Somebody suggested there might be a correlation between the two and the times a day, but I don't know. I don't want to get into that. But interestingly, as we moved on after that week, there was always a common theme. So they'd solve that problem, and then there'd be, the coffee machine might come to the fore, then the bins, then maybe the desks and whatever. And that tends to be, you're making iterative improvements, and you're able to improve the work lives of the people. Now, I'll go on. And another thing is, an insight we've seen is unconscious bias, I call it. One of our clients, and you'll now know why I'm not financial clients, and you'll now know why I'm not naming them. They have a trading floor where all the traders live, and they have a little bit of a reputation for complaining. So one day, through all of unofficial channels, the tap on the shoulder, the WhatsApp message, they shout down the corridor about the people being too hot and too cold on the floor. And of course, this was all taken with a pinch of salt. How could the people be too hot and too cold on the same floor? Until eventually, facility manager went down, had a look, and sure enough, there was something wrong. This end of the floor was cold, and the other end was trying to overcompensate. And despite what the BMS told them, it wasn't until they actually went down there that they found the problem. But imagine if they had had a bird's eye view of that, and the problems, not only from their building systems, but also the feedback from the occupants collated on a bird's eye view like this, where they can instantly see that this isn't just a bunch of Goldilocks, but it's actually, there's a pattern to the reports, and immediately they start to believe the data that's in front of them. I really hope there's no traders in the room, but we can have all the sensors in the world. The thing is, the facility managers don't believe it until they see it themselves. Now here's another more recent example, and it was actually, this is a graph from November to January this year. You see the gap in here at Christmas, and what you're looking at here. So this is a building where we have both data insights in the data lake from the building systems, and we also have Solve deployed. So what you're looking at here is building occupancy. So many people, well, it's actually a floor occupancy and the water usage. And in most buildings, there's a correlation between how many people are in the building and how much water we use. That's fairly standard. But you can see here, just before the Christmas break, there's a massive spike. And you might be thinking, okay, maybe there's an event in the building or something like that, and just before Christmas and we used a lot of water. You would be wrong. So here's what happened. On the evening of the 19th of December, the system triggered an anomaly detection and threw up a message to facility managers to say, there's an anomaly on our water usage on the first floor. We're using more water than usual. The following morning, 2 reports came in from actual users of the building. And you can see the spelling mistakes there and all. Toilet is running, cistern constantly running from 2 different users that reported it. Because those reports were location aware, the facilities team went straight to that toilet block in question, straight to the cubicle, and indeed found that there was a leak. So they decided it's so close to Christmas, we're just going to isolate that valve, and you can see water use returned to normal. In fact, went to 0 over Christmas. And then come January, and it spiked again. So they got another anomaly reported, and then shortly after, they got a report again from a user saying system is still constantly running. Can this be sorted ASAP? So the facility team went down again, and they found that unbeknownst to them, somebody, not the facility management team, had turned back on the valve. They brought a plumber with them this time, replaced, I think it was a siphon or something, and lo and behold, it was resolved. Simple problem, simple solution. But I think this is a really beautiful example of how building data and feedback from the occupants to get a quick resolution and ultimately saving precious resources and cost for a building that pays for water by the meter cubed and facility managers per hour. Now, if we only had the building data, so if we only had the water usage, would we have seen the problem? Might have, but who sits looking at graphs all day? If we add in the anomaly detection, okay, now we know there's a problem, but now we have to go find it. So, you know, that's going to take time. Could be, is it in a riser, a kitchen, a bathroom, where on the floor is the problem? But add in the third dimension of the feedback from the users, and suddenly we've saved resources every way. So, to come full circle on insights, I believe it's the data lake with its rich normalized data from all the building systems, coupled with the rich data from the building occupants in that same data lake, and presenting those insights onto a unified dashboard is where we really start to see insights into the day of life of a smart building. So we can add our anomaly detection or machine learning to predict as well what tomorrow might bring. Now, the theme of today's conference is the best is yet to come. So at present, I spoke about the Hereworks Happy Score earlier, which is a representation, it's a percentage score. It represents how well the building is meeting the needs of its occupants. Now, we have developed an algorithm to come up with that score, developed by humans, and it interrogates the data lake to come up with, and it's weighted to the, as we said earlier, to the specific building. But the data lake, all of our data lakes that we work with, they're always growing. We're adding more data sources to it. They're so multi-dimensional. The big data is just too big for us to comprehend. So we know that if we can train AI, it'll do a much better job at actually predicting the happiness of the occupants and identifying any barriers to their workday than we humans, mere humans, could. So that's exactly what we're doing. Rewind to our research with Dublin City University, and we're using that research to help train an AI model. We've actually focused on, I don't know if you've ever come across the workplace psychologist Peter War, and he proposed a 4-quadrant, is the 4 quadrants investigation of job-related effects and behaviors, which you can see behind me. And what he found, or what they found, was that the high activation pleasant effects were more strongly correlated with positive work behaviors. So things like feeling cheerful, enthusiastic, optimistic, that led to things like advocacy, being proactive, basically the things that really lead to being inspired employees. So we're asking a group of willing participants to help train this model in one of our buildings, and basically we ask them how they feel during the day, and then we're training the AI on the data in the data model. I can't wait to see the results of this. Hopefully might be back next year and be able to present that to you. But just to summarize, the real insights come when we marry the data from the occupants in the building to the building system data, aggregating these and delivering them to building managers to help create iterative improvements to create amazing workplaces. And the value just before I finish, if you think about the inspired employee, let's just forget about the 2.25 times more productive. If we can even increase it by 1%, and there's lots of ways to say that you do a lot more than 1%, on a floor, like we were looking at earlier, that had 220 people on that floor, that's worth about €211,000 per year to the average business. So the value is huge. And then if we look at the waste and how we manage our buildings, particularly for people with a large real estate portfolio, if we can make iterative improvements, and novel improvements to how we maintain those buildings to create a 2, 3, 4, 5% saving, they can be easily replicated across multiple buildings. So everyone in this room and the technologies we're developing, I believe, we're improving the human experience, not just for the building occupants, but for the people. We've seen the facility managers, they're stressed in their daily lives. These technologies will help relieve that stress and bring more peace to their lives, to their day in the lives of a smart building. So that's me. I think I'm a couple of seconds over time, but thank you very much. Okay.